Russia is doing everything it can to try and hold back Ukraine's counteroffensive, launching even more intense missiles and drone attacks than we have seen in the past month. Winters are over, and while Ukrainians are trying to enjoy a little breath of fresh springtime air while they can, we decided to take a look at what normal life in Ukraine looks like. You're listening to the Solutions from Ukraine podcast, which is brought to you by Rubryka. My name is Vladyslav Faraponov. I am the host of this podcast. And before we get started, let me remind you that you can support us at patreon.com/Rubryka. By becoming a member, you can get exclusive access to add your questions for us to address in the podcast, and of course get some of our exclusive merch to show off your support for solution journalism in Ukraine. Usually at this point I present my co-host Anastasia, but today I'm joined by my colleague Shawn Carrié. He's one of our editors.
Hey Vlad, good to be with you guys.
So basically, just to start with Shawn, we are really experiencing a tough week in Ukraine, again with Russian attacks and with really intense nights and days with their missiles and drones. But I guess we are dealing with it. People on the streets are smiling, like in one of the cafes in Kyiv. I heard the discussion about how the intense night actually went on, and people were discussing just like, did you wake up or not? And that's it. And they just a minute after that, they were discussing their work, business, friends. And also, it is important to mention that we are making this episode on Vyshyvanka Day. It's a day to celebrate and wear the most famous traditional clothing that goes back for centuries. And people are smiling on the streets, people are wearing Vyshyvankas and really looks so much proud of themselves and of their enjoyable time, I would say. So today we'll try to cover some observations about life in Ukraine. So we'll talk about people, economy, and how normality looks like in various cities and regions. Shawn, you recently gone on a trip to some parts of Ukraine far outside of Kyiv. Tell us basically, what did you manage to observe, and what thoughts do you have about the country, people after this journey?
Well, normal life in Ukraine is different from place to place and from time to time. What's normal now is different from the phase that we lived a few months ago. A few months ago, the problem on everyone's mind was electricity cuts, and before that, it could have been the bombing. And it's everyone's favorite topic to talk about the recent bombings. Whenever you go into a cafe, it's normal for people to talk about how they slept that night, thanks to the wonderful fireworks show that we get, thanks to our air defense. Everyone was talking this week about the intense night of bombing that we had, which is, I guess it's the first time we heard. It's the first time that Ukraine's air defense managed to shoot down a hypersonic missile. I think everyone in the whole city felt like it was on their street, because it was shot down above the city, and so the boom travels to everyone at the same time. And I remember looking to my window, and I haven't seen fireworks like that from the air ever at any point. I mean, I saw 20 missiles flying back and forth. Wow. It was like Star Wars. I couldn't even believe I was thinking, should I run to the corridor? But this is just, I kept thinking, what my eyes are seeing. This is just as we're talking about it, this is how people deal with it here in Kyiv. It's like people just meet up with each other and say, did you see what happened? Or we have a neighbors group on Telegram, and everyone in the neighbors group was just sharing pictures of their cats and dogs and memes, as just sort of grouped variously to kind of cope with this kind of intense bombing. Because, we can laugh about it now, but it was really one of the most intense nights of bombing I can remember in months. as much as we kind of feel like we can get used to the regular daily air raids, it all feels very normal until, you get woken up by 4 a.m. by a huge explosion that you think is on your street.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to understand that we're talking about the end of May in Kyiv, which is really beautiful, and also April was a bit cold too, and people are getting out and just enjoy the opportunity of being out in relatively kind of safer place, because for the past month, as Shawn just mentioned, the work of air defense systems and their numbers especially was increased, and relatively we can say that despite the more intense notifications about coming Russian attacks, there are more and more missiles and drones that are shut down thanks to air defense systems. So it gives people some hope that they should not be so afraid of Russian missiles and drones, that they can count on air defense systems.
I mean, everything seems normal and the air defense works amazingly. Yeah. Everything seems normal until one day it's not. Until we've all gotten a little bit used to kind of ignoring the air raid sirens and going on with our lives. And it all is very normal until one day a missile falls on the metro station, that's next door to. I remember a few months ago, just one metro station away from me, I went to the McDonald's there, and the coffee kiosk in front of the McDonald's, in front of the metro entrance, was blown to bits. And you can just be going to the metro and at any time, and a missile can fall on you. So it all seems normal until it's not. Well, Ukraine is a big country, and every city is really in a different circumstances with regard to the war, and especially at different times. Things in Lviv are far, far different than they are in Kherson, same as different situation in Dnipro and Kharkiv, and same, and as well as in different time periods, the way situation is right now is not what it was a few months ago. In winter, Kharkiv was a very dire situation, and still kind of getting over the effects of being under occupation, and now it's doing much better. And a few months ago in Kyiv, electricity cuts were a huge problem with Russia attacking the energy infrastructure, and now we barely have electricity cuts at all. And but electricity cuts are still a big problem in Odessa. And right now, Kyiv is facing a little bit more intense attacks as Russia is sort of feeling desperate and feeling that it has to start bombing people who are just trying to live their lives in the capital, as the counteroffensive is getting ready to be launched soon. Every part of Ukraine is really different, and the way that frontline towns deal with things is far different from the way it is in Kyiv. And this is something that I've observed, is that especially people outside Ukraine have ideas about the way that things are here. I think that I was also vulnerable to some of these misconceptions before I came to Ukraine during war, that I kind of felt that one common misconception people have is that thinking that all the men are conscripted, and that there's no men around, and women are running entire cities, near everything, in every store, and driving buses and driving taxis. And that's certainly not the case. And it's certainly not the case that we're running and hiding from air raids 24 hours a day, or just lying in our basements and hiding. No, a lot of life in Ukraine appears to be normal, and it kind of is, because people adapt to the situation in war, and it's really about adapting to things which people should not have to adapt to, like air raid sirens, like losing loved ones, or being separated from their families, whether that's whether that's a family member going off to war, whether that's somebody leaving the country, whether that's how your work situation has changed, how your friends and social situation has changed, how your work, and if you run a business or doing business or having work has changed, and it's changed for a lot of people that they've had to reconfigure their lives to a new reality, and that takes effect in very daily things like having to make sure that your phone is charged and your power bank is charged, and that you have bottles of water filled in case the water goes out, that you'll be able to take a shower or to flush the toilet or to wash the dishes. There are any number of things that change about your daily life and how to structure it because of the war.
Yeah, and this argument, I mean, I've also heard it a lot from some experts, like in the West. They point out that like how fast people are adapting, and I've given it some thought actually, and I think it's more about again people, but it's also about circumstances that change so fast that you need to be in time with and to be ready for tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. You need to make everything possible today, basically when you have the opportunity, like when you have the energy, when you have water and others. So it's about people.
Every person reacts in a different way. Just like it's a personal decision whether to stay in Ukraine or to move to Europe to safer ground. I think that that's a very personal decision, and it reminds me of a scene that I've seen in the trailer for the new movie Oppenheimer, which is coming out about the scientist who developed the atomic bomb. And there's a scene in the trailer where Cillian Murphy is saying to Matt Damon, they're about to test, the world's first atomic bomb, and they've never done this before. And Cillian Murphy, Dr. Oppenheimer says, there's a small chance when we press that button that we might destroy the world. And Matt Damon says, what are the chances? And he says, well, the chances are close to zero. And he says, close to zero? I'd like for them to be zero, please. And I just saw this trailer last night, and it made me think of kind of two types of people in Ukraine. If I told you, there's a 0.00001 chance that you might be hit by a car or struck by a meteor or struck by a Russian missile while you're sleeping. For some people, that would sound like statistically irrelevant or doesn't bother me. And for other people, they would say, that drives me crazy. I can't possibly live with that situation. I need it to be zero. So, for some people, that tiny possibility will eat away at their brain and not allow them to rest easy and think about things like going to school or going to work and continuing your life and just continuing to live and thrive. And for some people, that is a possibility that they can put out of their mind easily and, go on with their life. And in addition to other factors, about any number of factors that go into the decision to stay in your hometown and stay in your home country or to leave to go to a safer place.
Yeah. And Shawn, it would be really interesting to know, what do you think about normal life in places where you've been, especially I'm asking right now about Dnipro and Kramatorsk, because those cities are close to the front line enough. For example, Dnipro is close to the Zaporizhia region, and for example, actually Russians still occupying the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant and keep also kind of launching missiles at Zaporizhia itself. And in Kramatorsk, we know that it's like a transition point from the eastern side of the front, and there are like famous pictures of the train station where the soldiers are coming, like either after the service or before that to say goodbye or hello to their loved ones, and those really touching images are now on the internet. So basically, tell us about those cities, and what did you think it's special about them?
Yeah, Kramatorsk is a really interesting place that I went to witness and how people have adapted to life there, because they're not quite, we refer to them as frontline towns, but Kramatorsk is really on something like the second or third line. I would say it's like the third line, and it's a place where a lot of humanitarians and NGOs are based, as well as it's a place where soldiers who are stationed, it's sort of close enough that they can get leave from their commanders to spend a little bit of free time with their families, who then take the train out from other cities to visit them. So it's very common to see soldiers sort of on a few days leave, walking around the city and just going to cafes and spending time going on dates with their wives or loved ones, just to get a short break from the front. And this is I felt a really powerful example of how people have had to change their entire lives and adapt to having loved ones who are on deployment to the front, that they can just spend a little bit of time together at this sort of middle point. And when just being at the train station and seeing people smiling and just so happy to reunite with their loved ones, it's like, it's really kind of a beautiful thing, bittersweet to see some people reuniting and some people saying bye. But Kramatorsk is, like I said, a sort of third line city where NGOs or the support system of the front is based. And it's where you can see really a lot of the changes that happen. It's a relatively dangerous place for the rest of Ukraine, but it's still a relatively safe zone compared with the front. And because it functions as a sort of support base for different parts of the front, it's an interesting middle point between, the all-out war zone and the relative safety of the rest of Ukraine. Relative safety being a very relative term when compared with...
Yes. And it is interesting to know, like, what about business or economic activities in these two cities?
I mean, there's almost no business as usual in Ukraine, because the whole, anywhere in every city, the economy has shifted to a wartime economy. So there's no business as usual. But even in Kramatorsk, you can see, there is most of the population has moved out. Anyone who doesn't have to live there, why would they live there unless usually you don't see any young people. You see a lot of elderly people who have just decided that, like, this is where I live and this is where I'm going to die. If they want to come and kill me, let them come and kill me, but I'm going to live out the rest of my days in my home.
Yeah, it is really a dangerous narrative that we've seen and heard a lot even last year, especially like in the eastern Ukraine, but also like in the south of Ukraine, and it's more probably applicable to villages, like where people have at least some food that they have been growing, and like it was the point basically why they decided to stay. But in the city, I mean, sometimes I know that many Ukrainians are taking some hard time to understand those decisions, and it is still really a heartbreaking feeling when you like see those videos. for example, like volunteers are coming to take people out of the village, of the city, and they refused. And
yeah, that's what I would call the sort of second line behind the front, because those are the types of places where humanitarian evacuation crews will go and say, listen, you're on the second line, but it's about to become the front line.
yeah,
So
tomorrow or in a week. Yeah.
if you don't go now, then it's time to go. And so those are the type of difficult situations that those people are in. But Kramatorsk is, like I would say, the third line where it's relatively safe. There are stores functioning, supermarkets functioning. But when you go to the supermarket, you see it's not like a typical supermarket. There's no vegetables. There's like no fresh food. It's mainly serving the clientele of soldiers and humanitarian organizations. So you see like even the products on the shelf are sort of geared toward survival mode. It's like a lot of packaged coffee, dry food, like ready meals, short cook, easy meals. You don't see vegetables on the shelf at the supermarket, and there's very few businesses operating, and you see almost everything. Every vehicle that you see driving around the city is a military vehicle, which is you wouldn't see that in many other cities.
Yeah, Shawn, probably one of the last questions for today. Like you've also visited Kharkiv, a very important city for Ukraine, but also Ukraine's second largest city. It is important to understand, and it was seen in Ukraine like as a city of youth, like because it has like a lot of universities, and also the university named after Vasily Korazin, for example, was one of the first in Ukraine like in the modern meaning of the word university. And the city is also quite developed, and or at least it used to be. But since the first day of the full-scale war, it is really under massive attacks of Russian missiles, because it is a neighboring region. And I will just remind our listeners that last year, at the end of summer and the beginning of the fall, Ukraine's armed forces managed to liberate around 5,000 settlements in the Kharkiv area, in the Kharkiv region. So, like before that, the situation was difficult. And how's the situation right now? And like if we can talk also about the city of Slavyansk, because there are more and more missiles attacks on the city too.
Well, Kharkiv is, as you said, as the second largest city in Ukraine, it certainly doesn't feel like it now, because it's been badly battered. Even the downtown, even central downtown Kharkiv, there are whole buildings that have been destroyed. Whole apartment blocks, whole shopping centers, the municipal buildings that are really that look like a small town on the front. Even in the center of the second largest city, and having been under occupation, it it means that the city has been really badly battered, and there's barely any light at night. There's barely any light even in what was kind of bustling downtown center. And so things have come back to normal in the sense that there isn't active conflict in the middle of the city, and there isn't so active shelling. It's just maybe there's an air raid basically every night, or once a day, or twice every 3 days, and it never stops. And the air defense shoots down 95% of the missiles and one gets through every once in a while. But so there's not active conflict. It's, relatively speaking, comparatively safe compared with what it used to be. But it's certainly not any time close to recovering and getting back to what it used to be. So it's difficult to say that it's really it's certainly not back to normal. It's certainly not back to where it was, but at least the war has, the fighting has sort of subsided for now. For long, who knows?
And what about Slavyansk?
I mean, it's far different from, maybe we got a taste here in Kyiv the other night with this intense bombing of what Slavyansk experiences every night, but the bombing at night was, one shell every 10-15, one loud shell every 10-15 minutes, and plenty of happening in the distance. But it's in those areas that you never know when the shell is going to hit what. I think when I was there, one shell fell on a school. Or I could be wrong about that. I think that was in Kramatorsk, but you never know when it can, because it's only about 10 kilometers from the front, or not very far from the front, and you never know when the fighting can reach closer. When, for whatever reason, Russia decides to start sending more aggressive missiles and shells and artillery to hit this town, and who knows what they're aiming at and why, but, people just try to go on with their lives and try to get some sleep and hope for the best.
Yes, and as we see it, like normality is a solution for Ukraine. It is what we fight for, and that is what we donate money for. So, I mean, those like us, like journalists, editors who are not in the army. So that's really all we've got time for today, and thank you for your insights, Shawn. Thank you for listening. It has been like another episode of the Solutions from Ukraine podcast.
And to all our readers, you can find more episodes of the podcast at Rubryka.com or on your favorite podcast provider. Solutions from Ukraine is where we discuss problems and issues from Ukraine and also the people doing something about.
Yes, so stay with us and remember to support us at patreon.com/Rubryka. Your support helps us produce more independent podcasting and reporting, which will result in more help for Ukraine to win this hard but important war.